turn it over to Miss Lori. Hopefully everybody can see her center in your screen. And we welcome her tonight. And Lori, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself, if that's okay, and tell them a little bit about the millstone.
Sounds good. Can you hear me, Ken?
I can hear you. Can everybody else hear okay? Oh, one other thing I forgot to say, if everybody would please mute themselves in the interim, that way, and only unmute if you have questions. That way we don't get a lot of background noise of your conversations in your own kitchen with whoever you might be cooking with. Yeah, I can hear. Everybody else here?
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Kentucky Millstone. My name is Lori Himmelsbach, and my videographer tonight is my husband, Tom Himmelsbach. And we both run and operate the Kentucky Millstone in Butler, Kentucky. So tonight we are learning how to make Buckeyes and Brittle, in case you were signed up for like auto mechanics or something else. That's the only joke you'll get tonight. So we will just jump right in and get started. Just a teeny bit about me. I've been cooking forever. I love to cook. I love to eat. I don't do a whole lot of candy making because it is rather challenging getting started into candy making. But since Ken had asked me to teach the class, I did do kind of a deep dive into it. And it really had a lot of fun. So I think once you learn the basics of it and kind of take that fear away of, you know, the hot sugar and things like that, you'll find a lot of interesting things to do with candy making. We are going to kind of jump around a little bit tonight. So the method of what we're going to do is we're going to start first by toasting our nuts if we haven't already toasted them, because the nuts that are going to go into your brittle, when you toast a nut, the oils change the flavor profile of the nut. So it's going to be super important if you have the time and you're able to go ahead and toast those nuts. So to toast your nuts, you're going to want to heat your oven to about 350, let it warm up, and then you're going to put your nuts in, set your timer for maybe 10 minutes, give them a little shake. If you're not so sure about the heat on your oven, maybe even give them 5 minutes because the oils in there start to cook really fast, and we definitely don't want overcooked nuts. So we do have to toast our nuts first. I am actually using honey roasted peanuts, so mine are already roasted. Kenna had sent you your paperwork, so hopefully everyone has their paperwork. Mine's a little written on, which is cool because you can take notes on your paperwork and then they'll stay right where you need them. So you do want your paperwork, and you know, make a note on there too that you want to toast your nuts. She did say, I believe, let's see, for your, so she said cashews or any nut. So, you know, you're able to choose any kind of nut that you want to. But again, go ahead and get your oven preheating and get those toasted while we get started on our Buckeyes. So we're actually going to start with our Buckeyes so we can get those made and put them in the refrigerator or freezer to chill down while we're making our brittle. And then once our brittle's completed, then we'll go back and we'll dip those Buckeyes. We want to make sure they're nice and cold. So we're going to jump around just a little bit tonight. So, you know, if you get kind of behind, there will be a little spaces where you can catch up on things as well. Because it does take a little bit of time to shape all those Buckeyes and things too. So if you feel like you're behind, did you have a question?
If they're dry roasted nuts already, they do not have to roast them, correct?
That's correct.
If they are not, they need to stick them in their oven at what temperature?
About 350 for 5 to 7 minutes. Check them, stir them. If they have a nice little golden hue to them, then they're done and they can pull them out and let them cool. If not, you know, set the timer for another minute or two, but they take on that color really quickly. So you do want to avoid overcooking them. So what were we talking about?
Buckeyes.
Buckeyes. Yeah, so we're gonna, I probably will go ahead and shape all my Buckeyes tonight just so you guys can kind of see. But like this will give you guys some time to, you know, if you only get half of them shaped or you want to set them aside as well, it'll give you kind of time to catch up as well. So those of you that have had class with me before know that one of my big things that I love is mise en place. So mise en place is French for everything in its place. And what this means is as a chef or a baker or a candy maker, that you'll be more organized if you have everything set and ready to go. So I already have my mise en place for my Buckeyes ready. And what that means is we've got our creamy peanut butter.
Order online and carry out with Domino's Carside Delivery.
And then this is my little tray. I've got everything put together here. So we're all prepared. Another good reason to do mise en place is so that, you know, if you get started into it and you're like, oh, I'm gonna make Buckeyes, and then you're like, oh, I don't have any peanut butter. So we're pulling everything together. You know, we've got our butter warmed up a little bit, so at room temperature, so it makes it easier to cream. So if you don't have room temperature butter, or if your butter's not really soft, you may want to go ahead and put that in the microwave on, what is it? Defrost, so that it just like warms it up a little bit. We don't want to melt it, but we do want it soft because we're going to cream it with the peanut butter. So we're going to look through our ingredients and make sure we have everything. So we've got our creamy peanut butter. We've got our unsalted butter. We've got our confectioner's sugar. And let's see. And then once we coat them, we've got our semi-sweet chocolate chips and our vegetable shortening. So if we follow the directions, the first thing we're going to do is cream our peanut butter and our butter until it's thoroughly combined. And those of you that have cooked with me before know that I love my scale. And one of the reasons I do is because I'm going to measure out my peanut butter. You know, you can buy an 18-ounce jar, but like here at the bakery, we've got a 4-pound tub of peanut butter. And when I use my scale, what that means is that I don't have to try and wash the measuring cup. It's got all that sticky peanut butter in it. So I do love my scales. And you can buy scales pretty much anywhere. And like, they're just perfect for cooking. Another reason that I love the scale is because, you know, my 18 ounces of peanut butter on my scale is going to be the exact same as yours. Whereas my 2 cups of peanut butter may be different than your 2 cups of peanut butter because we might measure them differently in the measuring cup. If you are measuring it in a measuring cup, we want to use a dry measuring cup instead of a liquid measuring cup. And the reason for that is because you can put your peanut butter in here and then level it off and make it nice and level. Whereas here, you're gonna have a little bit of difficulty measuring exactly 2 cups. So again, the preferred method is the scale. Second one is this. The third one is this. So, you know, use your method that you can. So I've got my spatula here and I'm going to weigh out 18 ounces of peanut butter. I do like Jif. Like I'm a holistic, like health person. I really love healthy food. But, you know, for some reason, I guess maybe because I grew up with Jif peanut butter, that's really my preferred brand. But, you know, there's people that are like Skippy brand. And so you can use whatever, you know, your favorite is. And as you can see, I'm using 2 spatulas here. It means I'm going to have extra dishes to do. But like, I'm not going to have peanut butter all over my hands. All right, so we've got our 18 ounces. And then you're gonna weigh out your butter. So your 4 ounces of butter, I've already softened mine, but your 4 ounces of butter is gonna be 1 stick. So we're gonna put that in there. And then we like to stay nice and tidy as we work, so that, you know, everything stays clean and we don't have to, you know, have peanut butter everywhere. So same thing if you're, you know, teaching young children to cook, same thing, you want to set good habits in place while they're young. So we're just creaming the butter and the peanut butter together. You see, I've got a little lump there. So we're just going to give him some extra attention, kind of try and break him up a little bit. He wasn't as soft as we would have liked him to been. But we're actually going to get in here in a little bit and knead this with our hands too. So it's going to melt pretty quickly. And then a really cool tip is if you have a spatula, which is more like a spoonula, if you take and turn it upside down and scrape it, it can get it really clean. So this is something I like to do here at the bakery. So I do have some lumps in here and I'm not really worried about that because I'm going to add my powdered sugar to it and it will get, my hands will soften it up too. Set that aside. And we're gonna weigh out our powdered sugar. So you can either sift it and then measure out 4 cups. A lot of people will just probably go ahead and buy a 1-pound bag. And again, if you've got your handy dandy scale, So I got a huge bag, a 7-pound bag of powdered sugar here. So I'm actually just gonna weigh out 1 pound and then I'm gonna sift it because it's gonna be the same, you know, before and after, weight wise. All right, so we're at 1 pound, which is 16 ounces. And I like to keep my powdered sugar clipped to try and keep all the moisture out of it.
Lori, there was a question. What's the difference between using unsalted or salted butter?
Okay, so and we're going to talk a lot about butter today because there's a lot of times when butter shows up in our cooking. So in this particular instance, and all of my baking, I use unsalted butter. So anytime I'm making anything, I'm going to use unsalted butter because it gives you more control over the salt level in the item that you're making. When we go to the brittle, if you have it, we'll use salted butter to grease the foil. So when I make my English muffins, I grease my brittle. When I do my pancakes, I grease my brittle with the salted butter because your tongue touches that, you know, the pancake or the English muffin or the bottom of that brittle where that salt is. And so that's a really good spot to use salted butter. But in all of the cooking, I use unsalted butter just to ensure that I can control the salt level in it. All right, so you should have measured out your powdered sugar. So we've got 1 pound of sifted powdered sugar. And the reason we're sifting it is because it tends to be clumpy, like in the store. So it gets some moisture and stuff. So we just want to make sure that it doesn't have any clumps in it. So we're going to pour about half of that in. And then we're going to give it a good stir. Is everybody following along okay?
Trying to.
I move pretty slow, so hopefully we'll be good in this together. So you can see the powdered sugar is kind of starting to clump up a little bit here. So we're gonna add just a little bit more. And then if you look in your directions, it says gradually stir in the sugar until you can no longer stir it in. Then you'll have to finish kneading the rest of the sugar in. So what that means is it's almost impossible to continue stirring it. Because what this is doing is it's kind of hydrating the sugar and it's making it a little more tricky to get it stirred in there. So what I'm actually going to do, because I know my hands are going to get dirty, is I'm going to go ahead and get my baking sheet with my liner. So I've got some parchment here. And I've got my baking sheet already. And so that way, when I get my hands all dirty, I can just go straight to to my parchment instead of having to like go and get it all organized. So again, we're talking about the mise en place and having everything ready. So I'm not going to be able to get any more sugar stirred into this unless you want to call in a strong person to keep stirring for you. And so then we got to switch to our hands. And that's part of, you know, what I love about cooking is the tactile, you know, the feel. It's just real. I do a lot of bread making. And I just love, like, it's kind of like when you're a kid and you're squishing mud between your toes. So we're basically just kind of squishing that peanut butter and that sugar and that squishing it all together. And you're kind of using your hand as a spatula, kind of like scooping around the edges. You see it's all starting to come together now. And if you're toasting those nuts, check on them, make sure those nuts are looking good. And then usually about this time I have to switch to 2 hands because I just can't keep both. I can't keep my other hand out of it. So they both got to work together. And you see it's getting real, like, nice consistency here. I think that's beautiful. So the goal is to make sure there's no more white streaks of powdered sugar and that everything looks all, you know, homogeneous and it's a nice consistency, kind of like Play-Doh. All right, and if you like to taste things in the kitchen, no one is watching you. So feel free to have a little taste, make sure it tastes good and that you're happy with the flavor of it. All right, so now we're gonna shape it into balls. So we've got our Play-Doh peanut butter here. I like to use a scoop. I'm not sure what size this is because scoops never seem to say, but I'm just gonna look and make sure I like the size of the ball. And I'm like, yeah, that's a nice, it's not too big, not too small. It'll be perfect once we coat it with chocolate. So when I'm scooping, I like to have a nice flat surface and then just scoop it out in my hand and then roll. And the really good thing about using a scoop and about flattening it out is that we're making sure that they're all the same size. So in a bakery, it's super important because, you know, you don't want somebody to come in and buy one Buckeye and, you know, somebody comes in and buys a half a Buckeye. So that we want them all to be the same size. And plus, you know, if you're at home, it's nice to have them all the same size too because it looks very professional. So that's what we're trying to, and you know, you first eat with your eyes. So a lot of what we do here is make sure that the presentation of things is really nice. So we're going to talk a little bit later about, you know, the presentation on your brittle and everything, but we just want to make sure that, you know, that they look good. This actually rolling the balls too is a great project for, you know, some young people to help you as well. And you could also, if you wanted to, you could scoop all of them out like this. And then go back and roll them. So whichever method you prefer.
What would you use if you didn't have a scoop?
If I didn't have a scoop, I just use a spoon and, you know, gauge the right, so you can even use your spatula. So just use a little spatula and kind of eyeball it. They're probably not going to turn out quite the same size. I mean, they're not all going to be uniform. That's pretty close. So you could, you know, scoop some up and then make it into a ball as well. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of rolling it around, but then I'm kind of also shaping it as well, because when I roll it, it gets kind of pointy a little bit. And so I'm kind of like pushing those points down to make it look like a ball.
Okay, I'm going to answer a question real quick that came up on chat. Somebody asked if the butter, is the butter added to the peanut butter? If you watched her when she first started, or if you hopped on a little late, yes, she mixed the butter and peanut butter together and then the powdered sugar.
Now the original recipe, this recipe has been in my family a really long time. So long ago that like it was in a book that, you know, when Tom and I first got married. And so I had no idea where it came from or how old it is. And the original recipe actually told you to do it differently. It said to mix the, I think the butter and the sugar, but we tried it and it was just a total fail. So we kind of revamped the original recipe and found that creaming the butter and the peanut butter together actually worked a whole lot better than the original recipe. So that may be why that question's coming up.
And just for food safety comments, Lori says, if you're in the kitchen, you can taste it. Yes, you can taste this batter because there is no ingredients in it that you could not eat as it is. Where if we were mixing a cake batter with eggs or other things in it or cake mix, we could not. So this one you can. So.
And I like to be aware too, especially here at the bakery. We try and be very aware of cross-contamination because peanut allergies and nut allergies is a very big issue, and it's also very serious. So we do try and make sure, you know, that if we're doing anything that has nuts in it, you know, you want to avoid that cross-contamination as well. So we always wash in between items, but everything we're working with tonight has nuts in it, so.
And I saw some little hands helping roll balls on some of these videos. So there's some kids helping them.
All right.
And just remember, if your camera's not on, I don't know where you're at. So if you need something repeated or slowed down, you're going to have to ask.
So Kenna, are we good maybe with the amount that we've got to go ahead and move on? Or do you want me to roll all of these?
Well, as you start moving on, they will probably roll all of theirs. Just because unless you can save it and roll it more and finish later, but
You can, the issue you're gonna have is that, if you put it in the refrigerator, because it does have the butter in it, it's gonna harden up. So, we actually put it in the refrigerator and hold it, and then we just bring it back to room temperature to roll them out another time. So this is definitely something, if you wanted to go ahead and prepare it and then have somebody help you roll it later, it basically is a matter of bringing it back to room temperature. So we'll go ahead and finish rolling all the balls. That way people don't have to be concerned about missing out on getting the brittle started. And just checking in on those nuts again too. Make sure everybody's nuts are out of the oven.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the nuts that we're going to use in the peanut brittle. We'll kind of start talking about it as we transition into the peanut brittle. So, like I said, I hadn't done a whole lot of candy making before Kenna asked me to teach the class. So I started off with the brittle, and the class is called Beyond Brittle. So I'm like, well, I guess everybody can make peanut brittle, so we have to make it interesting. And I'm not a huge peanut fan myself. So the very first one that I tried was cashew and coconut. So I did a cashew and coconut brittle. And then a couple days ago, decided to get real creative because that's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy recipe development. So I did a pistachio and dried cherry with some lemon zest. So as we get into the brittle, you'll find, that there's all sorts of different interesting nuts that you can use, and we'll talk a little bit about recipe development. So tonight I am going to use, like I said before, the honey roasted cashews, because I think that's going to give a little bit of a different flavor to it.
Honey roasted peanuts.
Oh, Tom says I'm using honey roasted peanuts. So I am using that. But the sky's kind of the limit. I was somewhere and they had marigold and some other kind of nut. So, you can kind of really get creative with it. And these all make wonderful Christmas gifts. So, if you're wanting to make candy for Christmas gifts, you can do your Buckeyes and your Brittle, and you can make several different kinds of Brittle. And then we're going to talk a little bit later too about how to kind of garnish it and make it pretty and different. And so it's not just Brittle, on a plate. It's a little more creative than that. All right, so I've almost got all my little balls done here. And like I said, we're going to use the other end of our spatula. So we got our little scoop here. And so if we take the back edge of it, we can get our bowl really clean. And so, none of that peanut butter is going to end up in your sink.
and I need some thumbs up or see people with a shake their head yes, those that are on, to let me know how you're doing on rolling all your peanut butter balls. Are they about good?
So we are finished rolling here.
Yep, and I see a lot of heads shaking saying they're about good.
All right, so while you guys get your hands washed, I'm gonna wash my hands, and I'm gonna put my peanut butter balls, I think I'm gonna put them in the freezer. So they're gonna chill up real well. It'll take us probably about 45 minutes to do the brittle, and by that time, they'll be good and cold, because the goal is you wanna put your toothpick in it, and you don't want your toothpick to fall back out.
I don't think they can see me washing my hands.
You get to see a little bit of the kitchen here while I'm washing my hands. Tom will give you a little preview of our kitchen here.
If you don't know where their kitchen's located, or if they haven't told you yet, they are in Butler in Pendleton County. They have a wonderful restaurant. And you can see Lori sometimes at different farmers markets.
Yeah, so these Buckeyes will be appearing at the Fort Thomas Farmers Market tomorrow. We have all sorts of wonderful items going there. We got some macarons. We've got a new cookie I just tried called the Sarah Barnhart. So it's kind of like a macaron base, and then it's got some chocolate ganache, and it's coated in chocolate. So we do all sorts of fun things. All right, so I've got everything cleaned up. And I'm gonna, you can wrap yours with saran wrap, but I've got handy dandy little cover here for our restaurant. And then I'm gonna go put these in the freezer. I will be right back. Tom can entertain you.
That means everybody else is putting theirs in the freezer too, as soon as you're done. Shirley shared with us that she uses her rubber gloves while she's rolling, so her hands stay pretty clean. I'm a rubber glove fan too. Lori likes dirty hands. Kenna doesn't like dirty hands, but just remember, wearing gloves doesn't mean your hands are always clean. You still have to change those gloves and make sure you wash your hands if you're just using your hands as well.
Oh, she's talking about using gloves?
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought using gloves was a good idea, but I didn't figure in the midst of making it that I would say we could use gloves. So, but gloves is definitely a good idea. But I do like having my hands in it too. I go either way. So now we're gonna start on the brittle. First, we're gonna talk about the recipe, because again, that's part of mise en place, is making sure you have everything ready, everything in its place. Because you don't want to start boiling that sugar and then be like, oh, I forgot to get my baking soda. And then you go and you look for your baking soda and you don't have any. So we just want to make sure everything's ready. The first thing you're going to want to do is line baking sheets with foil. Now, Kenna gave some of you guys Silpat for, so it's a silicone. Was it a Silpat or just silicone?
It's a Amazon Basics. It came.
Okay.
at
Yeah, I think we've got some of those as well. So this one's a really nice big one. So it's basically 2 half sheet pans. So I just like this one big one, so then I don't have to worry about the 2 pans. So Kenna had read on your directions that you're not supposed to use it for candy making. Neither one of us could understand why. I Googled it, and there's like no information at all as to why you shouldn't use it for candy making. So I will leave that to your discretion. I've used mine 3 times already to make the brittle and absolutely love it. So again, that's gonna be your choice. One of the things that you could do is use your silicone and then line it with parchment. I do love my parchment. I use it for a lot of things. So here you could use parchment underneath your brittle, or what they're suggesting is line your tray with foil. And then here I would use salted butter to grease it really well. And again, the reason I suggest the salted butter is because, you know, when that touches your tongue, when you first bite it, you're gonna get that saltiness on your tongue, which, you know, is just a big flavor profile. So the first thing you're gonna do is go ahead and line those sheet pans with foil. Or if you have your Silpat, line your tray, but you're gonna wanna go ahead and have that ready.
I think the recipe said have 2, right?
Right. So mine is 1 big one, which is equal to the 2. So those of you that have silicone, the Silpats, you can use 1 on your tray and then line the other tray with foil and butter. So you're going to go ahead and have that ready. And we're just going to talk through the recipe first before we get started. You're going to want to butter the sides of your saucepan. So this is the size of pan that I'm using. It is I think it's a 3-quart. So you're going to want to butter the sides of the pan on that. And the reason we're doing that is because in candy making, it's very important to watch the sugar crystals. Just like if you've ever made caramel, you've made caramel and then all of a sudden it kind of like turns grainy. The reason for that is because the sugar crystals have gotten down in it. So they're actually putting some butter around the edges so that when it boils up, those sugar crystals are not hanging out. So then we will add the sugar, corn syrup, and water. We're going to cook over medium heat, stirring often until the sugar dissolves. When the mixture begins to boil, we're going to blend in our 1 cup of butter, which is going to be 2 sticks or 8 ounces. And again, here we're going to use unsalted butter so we can control the salt level on that. So then we are going to blend that in. We're going to stir it more frequently when it reaches 230. Now, Kenna gave you guys thermometers, so we're going to talk about thermometers as well once we get started. When the temperature reaches 280, which is soft crack, we're going to add our nuts, which have already been roasted and toasted and cooled. And then we're going to stir it constantly until it's at the hard crack stage, which is 300. We're gonna remove it from the heat and quickly stir in our baking soda, mixing well, and then we'll pour it onto our pan. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So again, I've got my mise en place here. And then I've got my, that's probably all. I've got my induction burner. I don't actually have a stove in my kitchen. So I've got an induction burner, which works really well. Really like this guy. And then I'm gonna use my scale. So it's nice if you're doing your mise en place and getting everything organized. It's kind of nice just to put it on a tray. So it's all like together. And then when you get done, you can just like move the tray out of the way. So I like having everything organized and neat and tidy, lots of space. Okay, so we've got our pan. And then I'm just gonna take a little bit of butter. Again, this is the unsalted butter. And I'm just gonna kind of like run it around the edges of it. Just to get a good like coating on it. And it's just the edges. You don't have to do the bottom or anything. It's really just to keep those sugar crystals from climbing. So we got it nice and greased. And again, one of the reasons why I love my scale here, we're just gonna put the pan right on the scale. And we're gonna add the sugar, which is 2 cups or 425 grams. So those of you that don't, I don't think I had the grams written on the recipe. So if you wanna mark that in, it is 425 grams of sugar. And again, my 2 cups of sugar is going to be different than your 2 cups of sugar, but my 425 grams will always be the same as your 425 grams, unless we got 426. All right, so we've got 425 grams of sugar, which is 2 cups. And then we've got our corn syrup, which is 1 cup or 300 grams. So I've already, like, when I do recipes, I convert everything to grams so I don't have to keep washing dishes. So instead of having to use my measuring cup here, I'm just gonna pour it directly in. So 300 grams. We go through a lot of corn syrup here. We make marshmallows. That's why you see such a big container. And I did recently read as well that corn syrup is actually not high fructose. So I thought that was very interesting because I try to avoid high fructose corn syrup. So this corn syrup is used more like in Cokes and soft drinks and things like that, but this is actually not high fructose. All right, so we've got our 1 cup of corn syrup or 300 grams. And then we're gonna add our 1/2 cup of water. So I do, I would measure this in grams too. You can do that as well. But I wanted to show you guys when you're measuring, we've got our liquid measuring cup here. And so when you measure it, you're gonna pour your water in and you're actually gonna get down on eye level and make sure that it hits that 1/2 cup mark. Because if you're looking here, it's gonna look totally different than if you're down here looking at the level. So we've got our 1/2 cup. And I'm just gonna pour that in carefully. All right, and you notice too, we haven't measured out our butter and we haven't measured out our nuts and our baking soda yet. So we haven't measured that out. And the reason is because it's gonna take a while for this to cook. So we're gonna go ahead and put it on. And I'm putting mine on medium. So medium heat's good. You know, we're not trying to crank it up or anything. It's just a nice medium heat. So I'm just gonna give it a little stir to make sure that that sugar's got some liquid in it. And then I'll even leave my spatula in here. This is a heat-proof spatula. So obviously if your spatula is not like heat resistant up to like 450 degrees, you don't want to leave it in there. So a lot of times I'll set it on the side here, or I also take little strips of parchment. And so another thing you can do as well is just set your little parchment there, and that way you keep your work surface clean. So while that is stirring often, while it's starting to dissolve, we're actually gonna go ahead and weigh out our nuts and our baking soda. So our baking soda, we want 1 teaspoon. So you can put that in a little measuring cup or, well, I gotta need one that's baking powder anyway. Oh, you're gonna have to wait a minute while I go get the right ingredient. So you don't wanna put baking powder in there.
So all of you should have got that candy thermometer that we gave out. I think most counties gave the same one out. This is a new candy thermometer to me. It should mix and keep temperature as you go. So it's a thing to maybe try. So make sure you're watching and see how it works for you. If you have another one somewhere handy, you're welcome to pull it out as well.
Sorry about that, guys. I didn't leave you. I just misplaced my baking soda. So we're gonna give it a little stir. Like it said, stirring frequently until the sugar dissolves. So nice little stir there. All right, so we're gonna do 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And then to do our teaspoon, I actually just dip it in there and then you just wanna make sure you level it off. And so we're gonna set that aside. So that's our mise en place for later. And then we're gonna measure our nuts. So we should have 3 cups of any kind of nut. And you can weigh these out as well. And you know, if you only had, and that's part of the reason why when I initially made this recipe, I used coconut. As I did a cashew coconut because I only had a 1.5 cups of cashews. And so I just added a bunch of coconut to it to kind of like equal out the amounts. So you can get kind of creative in the kitchen if you don't have exactly what you need, especially in terms of this, in terms of the nuts. So again, nice little stir. So we're doing that stirring often thing. And you notice too, I have not yet put my candy thermometer in here. Part of the reason is when we talk about those sugar crystals, I'm not sure what kind of candy thermometer Kenna gave you guys. Was it one like this, Kenna?
I gave them a new one we're trying. It's actually a candy thermometer on a spatula. So they can and do at the same time.
That is awesome.
If I have
not seen that. You guys are lucky.
Yeah, it's something new. I told them if they have another thermometer they've used in the past, keep it handy as well, just so they use both. But it was something new, and a lot of times.
Well, that is awesome because I actually was going to tell you guys I don't really like this thermometer, but I wasn't sure what Kenna gave you, so I didn't want to say anything. But there's all sorts of little joints and things in here where those sugar crystals can get caught from day 1 to day 42, and they kind of can hang out in there. And so this type of thermometer can actually kind of skew and like throw some sugar crystals in there. And another thing too is it clips to the side of the pan, so it's actually only measuring one spot. So I've tried to like it, but I don't. So I started using this one, which is a digital thermometer. It's basically a chef thermometer, and so it's not really. It goes kind of wonky as well, but I would like stick it in there and stir it around because I feel like you need to like know what the temperature of the whole thing is. So recently purchased this one from Amazon. For those of us that are older and can't see very well, it's got a huge digital, and then it's got a really long, so your hand's not sticking in there. And so we're actually going to use this one today. And then we're also going to talk about, if you don't have a candy thermometer, how to put it in some ice water. So if you don't have a candy thermometer, you might want to go get a bowl of ice water and several spoons, because we're going to show you the old-fashioned way before they started using candy thermometers of like testing hard crack, soft crack, and the different threads and the different levels of the temperatures of candy. And so again, we're stirring. Hopefully everybody's sugar, corn syrup, water is starting to melt a little bit. And mine's starting to get hot and the sugar crystals are starting to melt. Then we have to measure our butter. And so our butter was 8 ounces. So that's 2 sticks. And then I'm actually just gonna, cut it into cubes. And again, unsalted butter here. So when I'm cutting butter, you definitely want to be very careful. I've been doing a lot of croissants lately, and that requires a lot of butter. And so some of my digits have taken some tolls recently. So I always try to keep my hand on top of the knife. Depending on how soft your butter is too, it doesn't really have to be. Okay, so I hear my my sugar mixture boiling here. So you kind of got to be aware because at this point, if you're not careful and your pan's too small, it could boil over and make a really big mess on your stove. So that's something to really be aware of. But I used a nice sized pot, so hopefully we're good. And I'm actually going to switch my spatula to a new spatula because this one's got that sugar crystals we were talking about on it. So I'm just going to set that one aside and we're going to use the new one now that it's starting to boil. So when it starts to boil, we're going to add in our 1 cup of butter. So if you haven't already finished, chopping that butter up and weighing it out, let's go ahead and do that now. So it should be 8 ounces. All right, so we're right at 8 ounces. And we're just gonna very carefully put that butter in there. Because remember, we're talking about the hot boiling sugar here. And the reason I love this brittle recipe, I'm not much into hard candies, but this brittle recipe has the butter in it, and it makes all the difference. It's just this smooth, toffee, like it doesn't really stick to your teeth. The recipe is just very well designed. And so we're gonna stir that butter up a little bit. And it smells really good. It smells like butter.
Everything's better with butter.
Yes. All right, so any questions so far?
Lori, a question is, the mixture is not boiling yet. When it starts to boil, is that when they add the butter?
Yes, so when the sugar mixture begins to boil, blend in your butter. So you can turn your stove up a little bit. So that might be one of the things, just keep an eye on it and make sure, if your pan's small. That is one of the dangers of the sugar mixture, is it will boil over. We deal with that a lot with the marshmallows, is it just gets super, super happy. So mine's simmering away here. And then those of you with your digital thermometer, we're just gonna kind of or your spoon thermometer, we're checking it, and ours is at 224, 220. So you notice it's getting different readings depending on where I'm kind of stirring around. So we're right about 225. And again, I got my parchment here, so I'm gonna set it down there. So it says begin to stir more frequently when it reaches the thread stage at about 230. Mine's boiling quite a bit, so I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit.
How's everybody else's doing? Are some of you boiling? Can you give me a thumbs up or a yes?
We got some boiling. I turned mine down a little bit so they can, I do want to stay ahead of them though, so they'll see where we're at.
Well, one person says theirs is at 231.
Okay, so at 231, You just want to stir it more frequently. So we're at 226, 225, 226.
Some are still not boiling. And remember, everybody's stoves work a little different.
And I do prefer to stay ahead of you guys so that I can show you each step as we go. Because I don't want you to get ahead of me and then you'll be like, oh no, what do I do? So I'm going to show you here real quick. I've got my ice water and I'm going to take a clean spoon and just dip it in there and I'm going to drop it into the ice water. And then I'm going to reach in here and pull it out. And I can't really pull anything out at this point. I mean, it's down in there. You can see a little bit. So this is, that's at about 225. And we're going to keep doing that because back in the olden day when they didn't use the thermometers for candy making, you know, they were professionals at relying on the water test. You can do this with jelly too, to see what the temperatures of the jelly is if you don't have a thermometer. And I did this quite a bit because I didn't really trust that candy thermometer of mine. And so I was testing it that way too until I bought a new thermometer. So it's a good thing to do in a pinch. Mine's looking like it's about 230 as well.
I'm hoping the advantage to the spatula thermometer is you can keep stirring it and keep checking.
I think that's a great idea.
So hopefully that's
we're
working.
real-
Something new. I can't say I've tested
I
it.
haven't seen that. I think it's awesome. The cool thing about the this one here though is it gives you all the like your first one is your thread stage at 230, and then you go up to about 240 and it's soft ball, 250 and it's firm ball, and then we're going up to like hard ball, soft crack, and hard crack. So we're looking for hard crack on this, and I'll show you what the different ones are in the water as we go. So again, you want to make sure that you've got your nuts and your baking soda ready. And I'm going to go ahead and clear off my workstation so I've got lots of room to do what we need to do. Because you're messing with hot sugar, so it says when it reaches 230 to store it more frequently. So again, we're gonna, you know, keep stirring as we go, and we're gonna keep checking it and seeing, you know, what it should look like with the water. And now you can kind of see why that butter is on the sides too, so it's not sticking to the sides of it.
Nice.
It's just that's cold. And this is the part that takes a little while, takes a little patience. So if you were doing your Christmas cooking, you could be rolling those Buckeyes right now. You know, because we wanted to go ahead and get ours in the freezer so they'd chill down. But you could definitely be multitasking if you're good at multitasking. We're just trying to focus on one thing so we can get this brittle right, because it is a little tricky the first time you do it, and we really want to focus on that. But once you get the hang of it, there's no reason why you can't be, you know, doing your dishes or whatever while this is boiling, because it does take a little while. So in regards to, we were talking about recipe development. So if you have not seen it or heard of it before, the Flavor Bible, this is one of my favorite books in regards to recipe development. So when I was going to make the pistachio brittle, I had the nuts, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to add to it. So you can go in this book and then look under pistachios. If you can find it. There's a lot of tea foods, evidently. All right, so here we go on pistachios. Tom will give you a little view there, right here. And so then it goes through and it tells you all the different things that go well with pistachios. So I actually picked cherries. And then on the next page, we've got some lemon. So I put cherries and lemon in mine as well. So this book is great really for any kind of cooking that you do. I use it a lot for my recipe development with like scones and muffins and things. If I have an ingredient and I don't know what I want to pair with it, or make it very unique. This is a great book. All right, so let's see where we are again. Okay, so we're at about 2:30. I'm gonna crank mine up just a little bit. Where's everybody else at, Kenna?
If somebody could share with me where you're at temperature wise, or unmute yourself and tell us. 260, we have somebody at 245.
Okay, yeah, so I'm definitely, I'm gonna speed mine up a little bit so I can keep up with you guys. I turned it down some.
There's a few
And what we're,
still in the 230 range, one's still in 226, but they were a little slower to get
excellent.
boil stage.
And what we're doing here is we're actually boiling the moisture out of the products. So we've got the sugar and the water and the Caro and the butter. And what this boiling is doing is it's evaporating all that water out. So it's more of a condensed thing. So same thing with caramel. If you're making caramel, you're actually taking it to that higher temperature because it's evaporating all the water out of it.
There's one at 280.
Oh, so at 280, you're going to stir in your nuts. And then I would suggest turning it down a little bit if they can.
Yeah.
I'll crank mine up a little bit more and we'll get moving a little more.
Shirley,
So they're going to want to, and they'll make sure they stir it. Make sure you stir it too and see if it's truly at 280. Because you want to make sure that you're not just getting a hot spot. But if you're at 280, you're going to want to go ahead and stir those nuts in, and then continue to stir it until it gets to 300. So we're going to test our syrup here again. And notice I use a clean spoon each time, but this time it's more of a ball. So this is probably about soft ball stage. So we have a soft ball. So that's the next stage in it. And I did turn mine up, so we're gonna move along a little quicker here to keep up with you guys.
Most of them are where you're at it. I think it's just the.
Yeah, and if you need to too, if you're way ahead of me, go ahead and turn yours down a little bit. And let it just let it coast a little bit more.
Stay hot.
Make sure you're drinking your water.
Okay, yeah.
And we're supposed to be stirring it frequently too. So those of you that have the spoon thermometer, you know, that's nice for you to make sure you're stirring it. I actually was just stirring it with my thermometer, but I want to go ahead and make sure I'm stirring it as well because you don't want all that sugar sitting on the bottom of it. All right, so we're around 240 now. And 240, I gotta reference my other thermometer here. So 240 should be 20, 30, that's softball. So we still got a little ways to go.
Lori, can you tell them a little bit about the induction burner?
Yeah, so the induction burner actually, I'm not a scientist, so I'm not really sure the mechanics behind it. But it actually, you have to have a special metal, or not a special metal pan, but you have to have a metal pan that is magnetic. So if you have a magnet and you stick it to the pan and it sticks, then you can use it on an induction burner. So like my aluminum pan, I've got a small kitchen aluminum pan here. So this one won't work because the magnet doesn't stick to it. But this one on the bottom, it sticks. And so it just transfers heat that way. The really cool thing about it is the surface of it doesn't really stay hot. I mean, I've never been brave enough to just like stick my hand on it because that doesn't really make sense. But it stays pretty cool to the touch, which means it's, you know, safe around children and stuff too. And it's nice just to have, like, if you've got, you know, a basement where you want to do your candy making. I think this one was what, maybe 150 on Amazon. But it's awesome for me because I don't have a stove back here. And so anytime I want to, make like my cherry filling for the Danishes and things like that, this is great because it allows me to do that. So it's looking a little bit thicker. So we're up to about 240, 246, 250-ish. So notice it just moves when I hit those hot pockets of bubbles. So we're right around 250. So let's take a look again. And like I said, it takes a lot of spoons to do this, but it's definitely looking different. So we're gonna drop that in. And this looks more like a thread. So so we take this into a ball. This is more of a hard ball than the other one was. So we've got a hard ball now. So we're at about 250.
And if somebody's at 300, so they need to turn yours way down, right?
Yeah, and so if you've gotten to 300, you probably need to go ahead and especially if you've already got your nuts in there, you're gonna wanna add that baking soda, stir it up real good, pull it off the heat, add the baking soda, and then you're gonna put it on your lined pans. And if you can turn it down and keep it below 300, you can hang out with me, but mine's still gonna be a little while.
So if you reach 280, remember, if you haven't turned it down, you're adding your nuts and your, what else were they?
No, just your nuts.
Just your nuts.
Yeah, because we're not adding that baking soda until we take it off the stove.
Okay.
So we're right around 260 now. So we're gonna test it again. And you don't have to do this at home. I'm just kind of like doing it to show you guys what the different, if you don't have your thermometer with you. So this one's more, it's cracking, you see? So this is more of like a soft crack. So we're at about probably 270-ish right now. And it looks like it's moving right along because it's kind of changing color too. So let's see where we are. We're probably getting pretty close. Yep, so we're at 270. So we're super close. So I'm going to turn mine down just a touch. The reason I'm turning it down now is because I can tell like it's steaming and bubbling real quick, and I don't want it to burn. So those of you with the spoon specialists, that's okay. So mine's reading, it's hitting right around 280. So I saw it hit 280, 84, 86, and then it goes down to 270, 275. So we're right about where we want to add the nuts. And I don't have any more spoons, so I'm just gonna do a quick test here. We drop it in.
Lori, real quick, if they had the parchment paper, can they put that on top of the silicone mat?
I haven't tried it, but you should be able to. So we're still, although it looks like it's ready, I've still got some soft spots. You see how it's bending? So we're not quite at that hard crack yet. Yeah, I would err at this point. I would err on the side of caution on the parchment part. I mean, normally I would say it would work, but I don't want to like tell them and then they can't peel it off of it. Because I haven't personally tried it. All right, so I'm at 287, 286-ish. So I'm gonna go ahead and stir my nuts in, and that's gonna actually drop the temperature.
So hopefully everyone's about where she's at and adding nuts. If you haven't already, I see some of you are even ahead of that. And I've already.
And I'm gonna pull it off the heat just a teeny bit because I need to get those nuts distributed. And this is where you're gonna be like super, super careful about any splatter or anything like that. You just wanna be real careful about making sure that, that you're not getting yourself a candy burn. Yeah. So your spatula would be much better used than where I'm at with mine, my thermometer here. 'Cause
I
it's
haven't
not
heard
really-
anybody, only heard one person so far say they're working well. So hopefully they are working well for most of you.
Well, you can see like I'm struggling a little bit with my digital one here because I can't stir and hold it at the same time. And like I said, it did drop the, yeah, you got that. It did drop the temperature of the candy. And so now we're just trying to get it back up to 300. And I think the second batch I made with the cherries, I actually threw the cherries in here at this point, and it kind of candied the cherries. It made it a little bit difficult. So I would have added the cherries later. But again, what we're doing is we're pulling any excess moisture out. So I'm about 266. And if you didn't have Tom holding your pan for you, you know, you could stir and then stick your thermometer in there and stir. And
Yeah.
But it is nice having a partner. So we're at 281.
I love my thermometer, Kenna.
With the
Oh.
spoon?
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah, I will have to check that out.
If you've ever tried to do what Lori's doing, not have that extra hand, it's really hard. You end up stirring and then checking. So
Yeah, and that's a valid point because you know, the minute that you start spurring and put your thermometer down is about the moment it reaches 300, and then you pass the stage that you need to be at. Mine's at about 280. So we're getting real close.
hopefully,
And at this point, you really want to be diligent about stirring and scraping the sides and the bottom and everything down, because this is where it'll burn on you. Mine's all over the place.
and I know some of yous are still not up to that temperature. Just know, Lori, you'll know what Lori's doing so you can keep on.
Yeah, so I'm at 294. But again, that's the tricky part, is because the thermometer's kind of all over the place. It's giving me some different readings based on, you know, the heat bubbles.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm close to 300 here. So I'm gonna actually, one last test, putting it in the water, and it should be like a hard crack test. So when it hits, it'll just pretty much be hard. Yeah, and see, I still got a little bit of play in there. So it's still, you know, it's not cracking totally. So I'm real close. I'm just gonna give it another couple minutes on here. And I'm afraid if I use my thermometer, it's gonna take too long for it to read anyway.
I'm at 300.
Awesome, I am too, so we're gonna go for it. Because it's kind of in between, and if you pull it off a few seconds too early, you'll be all right. So at 300, we're pulling it off. And then I've got a pot holder under here to keep it, and then we're gonna kind of like make sure you don't dump your baking soda all in one place. It's gonna start to bubble. And it gets light and airy. You see the little bubbles over here on the edge? That's the baking soda getting light on it, mixing in. You see that it's changing the color. And that's one of the reasons why I like with the butter in it. It just makes it creamy. All right, so now I'm gonna dump it on my Silpat.
Remember, if you're not on a Silpat, you're on your foil that's been buttered with salted butter.
And then I'm just using my spatula to kind of make it thin. Your recipe says, you know, use your forks. But you know, if you move quick enough, you can go ahead and get a real nice thin layer. But you notice it's setting up pretty quick, so we want to go ahead and make sure we're getting a nice even layer there. Again, being super careful that you don't get it on you. So this is what we're going with.
I'm going to answer a question really quick. On your thermometer, and somebody asked if you can immerse the spatula, I would not put the part that has the battery part in. I would clean every part up to the battery, but don't immerse the part where your battery is located.
So this is what we're looking like. At 300. So you see the nuts, they're already honey roasted, so they got a nice golden hue to them. So again, that's one of the reasons why I like the toasted nuts as well. So while you guys are finishing up, we'll talk a little bit about, while this cools, we're gonna talk a little bit about finishing your product. So this is the brittle that I did the other day with the cherries and pistachios. And so I've got it, displayed in a nice little bag. These are 4-ounce bags. I sell them for $4 here. And they're like nice and, good flavor. And so then this is, if you're giving us Christmas gifts or you want something a little different, this is a good way to finish them as well. So these are chocolate covered. This one's got a little bit of sea salt on it. And then a couple different ways to garnish it too. We could use some luster dust. So this is a non-toxic gold powder. So you could just like brush a little gold on there too. So nice and festive for the holidays. But just make sure that it's non-toxic because you don't want to have toxic gold. And then this too, I love this stuff. This is 25 karat gold, gold leaf. So got this on Amazon. It's a little tricky to work with. So I bought these because it'll stick to your fingers. So I bought these tweezers, but they don't really work all that well either. So typically what I tend to do is I just kind of like crunch it up a little bit and then just dab it on there. And so we've got some edible gold leaf now to garnish. And so these are just a couple of the ways, that you can kind of take it beyond brittle and make it like really cool and personal. And so it's kind of like you can fall into this rabbit hole of great garnishes and things. We'll walk over here and show you the sprinkle drawer. So this is the sprinkle drawer. And so here at the bakery, we collect all sorts of like dusts and sprinkles and, flavorings and things like that. And so these are great to garnish. And so again, when we talk about you eat first with your eyes, we love to make things look great. Because then people are just really impressed and then they're gonna think they taste great too. So hopefully you guys are about where we are. You can see it's setting up some. I'm not gonna touch it because it's super hot, but you see it's kind of like starting to set. So we're just gonna let it cool. I'll check in with Kenna. Where are we, Kenna, in regards to because we're not gonna start dipping our Buckeyes until everybody's done with the brittle.
I need to know how people are doing with their brittle. I have a couple that aren't quite up to temp 265 yet. So we'll let it go for a little bit. How's everybody else? I've only seen that so far. How many have already got them panned and on their pan? I see a couple were done. How many?
So the ones that have finished, how did it turn out? How was the temperature and does it look like brittle?
Some are almost there with the cashews in. Mine is on the pan.
Mine looks good.
I'm hoping that says terrific, Sandy, not terrified. Denise says hers looks good. Several are on the pan, so I think most people are staying right on.
Awesome, awesome.
If you haven't put a little, if you haven't ever like even topped your chocolate chip cookies or anything with a little bit of sea salt, oh my gosh, you don't know.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I had actually, that's why I had my salt sitting out here. I don't know whether it's, yeah, mine's already dry. So that actually kind of was something I wanted to tell them because we've got the honey roasted nuts. Yeah, I don't think it'll stick now because it's not sticking to my finger, which is a good thing because it would hurt. But I love my Maldon salt. So we have several different kinds of salt here in the bakery. And this one I used to top the focaccia. And it's just really nice big crystals, but it isn't overly salty. So it's just a different crystal size. So if you were to want to do like a sweet salty kind of thing, I would definitely recommend the Maldon salt. And so it's a Fleur de Sel or a sea salt. But yeah, Ken, that's a great idea.
Yeah, somebody's already broke theirs and tasted it, so.
Oh,
That
That
was
must
the
have
person
been-
that was way far ahead of you.
it had cooled.
Yeah. Most everybody, we have a couple that are semi-close.
It's soft.
Yeah, I'm gonna grab another silk hat. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Somebody, they're good. We have a couple people adding their nuts right now, so everybody's super.
Awesome. And what I like to do too is I'll actually flip it over, and so then that way it kind of transfers the heat, and so it cools a little more quickly. This pan's gonna be hot because it's got all that transfer of heat on it. And so basically I'm flipping it over and it just allows it to cool. And you see how it comes off the silk hat? So one of the reasons why I love my silk hat, but this gives a little more air under it to cool it. And if you wanted to, like you notice it's kind of thick here, then you can kind of start to stretch it out a little bit more just to keep it from being too thick in certain spots or something. But you want to avoid touching like where it's super hot because it'll burn you. So we're going to let this cool somewhere while we get started on dipping our Buckeyes.
Yep. I think everybody should be about there and ready to go.
So I'm gonna finish getting my mise en place ready and getting everything set up while you guys finish getting your area cleaned up as well. Because again, we're wanting to start with a nice clean work surface.
But she has a weird looking fork there.
We're not using this, but I did want to show it to you when we start talking about dipping the Buckeyes. This is actually my truffle fork. So I've actually had that since chef school. And it basically, I wanted to show it to you guys in case you decide you want to get into candy making and make truffles, and you can make your own truffle fork.
There are people eating the brittle already, so. That's fine.
Is it not sticking to their teeth? Mine hasn't cooled yet.
Some people have no patience.
I'm trying to figure out how to get it out of my pan.
Out of your pan?
Yeah,
So
just heat the pan back up. Heat the pan back up with water.
All of it went into the sheet pan, and most of it's on the sheet pan. But for those of you that are wondering like how to clean your pan, the thing I find is that if I let it soak overnight, just fill it up with water, warm water, and then just deal with it tomorrow morning. Because it needs like that moisture to break down all the sugar and stuff that's on it. So it will be very difficult to clean tonight. Same thing with the thermometer, is I'll just stick the tip of that thermometer in there and just let it sit overnight, and just leave it and clean it tomorrow.
Cool, thank you.
So we've got our chocolate chips. So this should be a 12-ounce bag. I buy them in bulk, so I had to weigh mine out. I love chocolate. And then I've got 6 grams of vegetable shortening. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want to dirty my teaspoon up. So we're going to just measure out. I'm going to measure out 6 grams. But for those of you that, don't have a measuring spoon, you're just going to, or a scale, just measure your 2 teaspoons. And the reason we're putting this vegetable shortening in here is it makes it a little more like viscous, and it's not as like when you bite into a Buckeye, you don't really want that crunch. You want a little bit of a softer chocolate. Whereas if we're doing truffles, we would not want to put the shortening in there. We would just want to temper our chocolate so you get a nice hard crack when you bite into that truffle. So ours actually says to use a double boiler, but I recently found a microwave. I love my microwave. So it's really easy to do in the microwave. So I'm going to show you that as well. But if you'd rather do it with a double boiler, one of the biggest things I have to caution you against is moisture, like water and chocolate, don't really mix. So with a double boiler, when that steam comes up, it actually comes back down into the bowl. So you want to be super careful to make sure that you're melting that chocolate over kind of warm, hot water versus boiling, bubbling, furious water. Because that steam will actually get into the chocolate, and that's what turns your chocolate kind of like white. So to melt ours, we're gonna put this in the microwave for 1 minute. And that's just on regular heat. And then while it's melting, I'm gonna go grab my Buckeyes out of the freezer. Nice and cold.
Which is good.
Oh yeah, they're perfect. Nice. I already have my second piece of parchment here. So when I measured my parchment, I just went ahead and measured both of them. And then that way, we're just already ready for it. All right, so if we take a look at our chocolate, we got a little bit melted in here, and then there's lots of chocolate on the outside that's not melted. So we're basically just gonna stir that up. You notice our shortening is melted. And the reason we're stirring it up is because that microwave actually just heats that one center spot. And if we were to not stir it up and put it back in there, it would tend to burn your chocolate. And the way that you know that is it gets kind of crystally and clump, and not clumpy because that's clumpy, but it'll get kind of crystally. So we're gonna go another 30 seconds. So any questions on the brittle?
Doreen, she said a minute in the microwave first, then she put it back in for another 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Mm-hmm.
And then somebody had made a comment, they used their cookie drying rack to cool their brittles.
To put the brittle on to cool it.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna check it again. And it looks better. And it feels hotter. And it's starting to melt, so it looks really nice. The bowl's kind of warm. So you notice I like stirring all the way around, cleaning up the sides. And then I'm gonna go about another 15 seconds. And again, we talked about those little pieces of parchment. I just tear little strips and keep them here. And then that way, anytime I have a dirty spatula, I just set it on the parchment so that I don't have to continually keep wiping up. So I don't want to melt it fully, but I want to melt it most of the way. So you can see there's still some pieces of chocolate in there. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to stir it until it melts. So we're going to use that residual heat. And we're just going to keep stirring it. And so this is kind of the way that you temper your chocolate as well. And then while we're on the subject of chocolate, I guess I have to tell you guys about my Ruby chocolate. Okay, so this is, I don't know that you can find it. You might be able to find it online. I bought it to play with. I like to play. That's kind of the reason why we had a cafe, is because we like to play. And so we do all sorts of cool things. But this chocolate, it's actually a pink cacao bean. So like normally chocolate cacao beans are brown, but this one actually is pink. And so it actually makes pink chocolate. And so there's no dye and no food coloring in this, but it tastes totally different. So this is like, if you like to play in the kitchen and you want to do something different, I would suggest playing with this. So it's super fun. It's
It'd be
by
really
Callaway.
cool at Valentine's when you're looking for all kinds of pink alternatives.
Yeah, but it's just the flavor, and it's great, and it's just a fun chocolate to play around with. I don't know that I would want to do pink Buckeyes. That might just be weird.
Yeah.
All right, so you see, I didn't put it back in, and I'm just letting that residual heat And I'm gonna keep stirring it until all the little chocolate bits are gone.
Lori, while you're stirring, somebody asked if you've ever put vanilla in your brittle. She has a recipe that calls for vanilla.
I think that sounds awesome. The only thing I would wonder about is like that high temperature is going to burn off like a lot of the vanilla flavor. So like I'm not a huge imitation vanilla fan, but I did recently read that if you're going with a really high temperature, that an imitation vanilla actually would carry the flavor over, because otherwise it might like burn the flavor off. But I've not tried it. All right, so we got nice silky smooth. So you see all those little beans that, or all the little chips that were in there are now gone. Awesome. So we are going to use our toothpick here and just stab it in the middle. And then you want to make sure your bowl is deep enough that you can actually, you know, dip your Buckeye in there. And then I want to get most of that chocolate off. And then you can kind of just, what I do is I twist the toothpick to pull it out. So the reason we had them in the freezer was so that we didn't so they didn't fall off the toothpick. If you got too much chocolate on it too, you can kind of wipe the bottom off so you don't have too much chocolate on the base. And again, I'm just using one finger to hold, and then I'm twisting to pull it out. And so all I have is just this little hole there. Tom has a Buckeye. He'll show us what it's supposed to look like. So this is, yeah, this is what we're going for.
It has a toothpick hole too.
Okay, so maybe my scoop was a little bit big and I should have done them smaller, because his Buckeye's a bit smaller there. All right, so this is what they should look like. And then once they set, what we're gonna do is we're gonna either use our finger or a toothpick or whatever, just to kind of like make the hole go away. So just a quick demo with the truffle fork. So if you are doing truffles over the holiday season, you just basically take a fork and bend the tines back. And we're gonna stick the truffle in there and then coat it completely, because we want our truffles to be chocolate coated. And then you're basically just getting all that chocolate off. And then we're gonna, and then you can just use your fork to kind of like smooth it around and make it beautiful and put a little design on top, like that. And then you could put some sprinkles on it if you wanted, or sprinkles. We love our sprinkles. All right, so I'm gonna keep dipping, but any other questions that you guys have while I dip? Are they all eating their brittle, Kenna?
They might be all dipping their balls, probably. Be my guess. They're probably, all their peanut butter is being dipped.
Well, good.
And that will probably take you guys a little while. And some, yes, are eating their brittle. So how many of you, and you can just kind of show me a raise of hand answer in the chat, have made candy before, or Buckeyes or Brittles before, or this your first time experiencing with some kind of candy making?
I've tried a time or two, but not much. This is neat though.
Some are first timers.
I've made other cans of candy, but this is the first Brittle and first Buckeyes I've ever done.
Awesome.
So we have two people here at our house, and Jennifer has never made any kind of candy, and I usually make bourbon balls and fudge. So I know a little bit about doing the candy thermometer, but I've never made brittle, and this is exciting. It's great.
Well, to be honest with you, I've never made brittle before she asked me to teach the class. So
You don't tell people that, Lori. You don't tell people that.
Well, no, it proves to you that if you want to do something that you're able to educate yourself. So, you know, my first point on that would be, if you don't know how to do something and you want to do it, you have to find a solid source for your recipe to begin with. So there's a couple of sources that I like Cooks Illustrated, Serious Eats is another good one. And so, you know, those types of things is you really need a solid recipe, because otherwise if you go into making it and it's not a good recipe to begin with, it's really easy to get frustrated.
There's a lot of first timers, Lori.
Awesome.
I say a lot of it going. And yes, Anna, I know you make awesome bourbon balls.
And so when I was showing you the truffle, how to dip the truffles, you can do that with bourbon balls as well.
This is Donna. My brittle's really good. Thank you.
What did you put in it?
Cashews.
Oh, yum.
Somebody wants to know how the best way to break up the brittle to the appropriate size. Is there an appropriate size?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Well, let's take a look at mine and we'll see how it's looking. I'll bring it over there.
Shiny.
I think this is the appropriate size.
Yeah, there you go.
So I basically just kind of like break off a piece, and then, you know, depending on how big you want it, I like this size, and then dip it in chocolate if you wanted to, or it smells really good. I'm not going to eat it right now because then I'll have like brittle in my teeth while I'm trying to talk to you guys. But yeah, you just kind of, yeah, it's fun.
And
So then these guys here that we were talking about before, you're basically just gonna kind of like, you know, pinch the top and kind of just shut the top of it so it's looks like a Buckeye. And you can use, like, if you don't want to like touch it or whatever, you can use your toothpick too to kind of mat it down, shape it.
I like to see that there's several first timers, so that's good. And hopefully you'll make it again and try it again.
It's kind of addictive. I was surprised because, like I said, I'm not a huge candy eater, hard candies, but I really, really like this recipe because it's got the butter in it. And so it tends to be softer than like a regular brittle would be. But yeah, you can be very, and that's the fun part too, is you can be like super creative about the things you put in it. So it's not like you're gonna get bored and be like peanut brittle, peanut brittle, peanut brittle. You can be like, oh, hey, let's do macadamia nut and cashew. Let's do, Tom saw some like spiced, what were the spice nuts you saw today? Like some kind of like wasabi flavored.
Habanero.
Some habanero, like almonds or something. So, you know, the sky's really the limit to your creativity, to have fun with it, because if you're making it, you kind of get to play around and make whatever kinds you want to make, and then, you know, give it away or eat it.
So I know you guys probably still have more balls you're dipping, and I know some of you might be done or can keep on dipping even after we're off, but is there any questions you have for Lori? You can unmute yourself, you can ask.
And if you get, you know, later on, if you get to the point where you have a question, you can either email me or email Kenna, and she can get questions to me as well. And so if you haven't been to the Kentucky Millstone, you want to come visit us. We're open Thursday through Sunday from 7 to 2. And then we're open on Friday night and Saturday night for dinner from 5 to 8. So we do have limited hours just because we do the Fort Thomas Farmers Market. And it takes a lot of prep to do. So you can find us at Fort Thomas too. We do croissants and morning buns and things like that to the Fort Thomas Market. So
This is Don. I do have a question. My cashews were unsalted, but could you have used it as salted nut as well?
oh, definitely,
That's
yeah.
right.
So and I think a salty sweet snack is like awesome. Like Kenna was suggesting, sprinkling some salt on top. Mine were honey roasted, and so you know, you can have those different spices and flavorings in there So even with the unsalted cashews, you know, if you wanted to do like a Thai inspired, like cashew lime and like some kind of spice, chili or something,
Okay.
you can really, you know, put whatever you want to in it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Lori, there was a question like, when they were making their, what kind of cookware do you use? What did you, like, they're just wanting to know because they switched.
Yeah, so most of the stuff I have is all restaurant stuff. And so I purchased mine, it's a Winco brand. I don't even know that you can find it online. This one's super cool because it's got a really heavy, you can see the bottom. So, you know, when I'm making the brittle and it's going up to 280 or 300, it's got a really solid core to it. So it's kind of like an all clad, but it's got a nice core to it. So you're not getting that extreme heat that you might if you had a real thin, like the aluminum one here. It's got basically no base to it. So as you're cooking, it's going to get a lot hotter and it's going to have hot spots and things too.
Do you have any upcoming pasta classes?
What was your question?
Do you have upcoming pasta
Do
class?
you have,
I think maybe the pasta classes are sold out. We have online, there's our, like a lot of different classes are online. So we teach Introduction to Pasta, which is a super fun class. We do an Introduction to Baking, which talks about yeasted breads. I do a lot of the Introduction to Sourdough breads, and Introduction to Sourdough bagels. So we do a lot of introductory classes. I may add another one in December because the November one